Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rahul Pereira. The government on Tuesday described as political absurdity a map released by Pakistan that includes Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh and parts of western Gujarat. New Delhi tore into the map, which it called a ridiculous assertion without any global credibility, and emerged on the first anniversary of the decision to scrap special status for Jammu and Kashmir under Article 370. The map was released on Tuesday evening by Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan. We have seen a so-called political map of Pakistan that has been released by Prime Minister Imran Khan. This is an exercise in political absurdity, laying untenable claims to territories in the Indian state of Gujarat and our union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, the government said in a statement. In the big picture, we will analyze Pakistan's absurd new map. Joining me on the program today are Dhruv C. Katoch, Director, India Foundation, Vishnu Prakash, former ambassador, and Harshveer Pant, Head Strategic Studies Observer Research Foundation. Thank you to all my guests joining me on this edition of the Big Picture. Ambassador, let me start the program with you first. Let's hear your thoughts on this political map that Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan released earlier this week.
Well, there are two ways to look at it. One is to look at it as a cartographic aggression, and the other is to look at it as a product of delusion. I would look at it from the latter angle. Unfortunately, our neighbor lives in a make-believe world, and instead of getting their own house in order, any other country would want to get their house in order. Look at where Pakistan is today. It is heading towards being a terror state. The FATF sword dangles on its neck. It is debt-ridden. It's a basket case. I was just reading the other day that they have just taken $1 billion, which China has gladly given, according to the article. It was a Dawn article, to Pakistan, so that Pakistan can repay the debt given to Saudi Arabia. And why did they take money from Saudi Arabia? Because they wanted to pay other debtors. So, I mean, and last year they have incurred further debts of about $13 billion. There are no resources. It in a way saddens me that things have come to such a pass. Now, no purpose is served other than making, creating further ill will. Nobody takes them seriously. It's not the worth of paper it is written on, but clearly it is not just instructions from within, but I think there is a cue from outside. Let me say before I close that it used to be said that Pakistan is run by America and the army. Now, instead of America, it is being run by China and the army. And Mr. Imran Khan is but somebody who is an appointee who will do the bidding of the people who have appointed him at that position.
Okay. Let me take the points that you're making forward. General, what do you think is the biggest reasons why Pakistan has done this? And what do you make of the entire, controversy that surrounds this new map that Pakistan has released?
Frank, what has happened is that on the 5th and 6th of August last year, when the Indian Parliament, we abrogated the special status which had been given to Jammu and Kashmir. So we found 35A being abrogated, and the specific provisions of 370 were also done away with. Now, Pakistan could not get a counter to that particular development, and they still have not been able to get a counter to this development. And there is intense pressure on Imran Khan to do something. There were comments being given against the Pakistan military where people said that now you keep talking about Kashmir, now India has done this, what are you going to do? Because the Pakistan military was actually exhorting the people from Gilgit-Baltistan to cross over the border and fight. And the people said, listen, it is your job to fight. We have put you there in power. We are paying you exorbitant sums of money to fight. But they don't want to. He says, don't tell us to fight. It is your battle. Now, because they have not really been able to do something, you want to show your people, listen, we are also getting aggressive, right? And that is the reason I think they have gone on to this absurdity to do what they have done. Besides Jammu and Kashmir, which, okay, there is some, you can say, a 0.01% logic you can put. But to put some logic on Junagadh, it really boggles the mind. I mean, how can you even think of claiming Junagadh? It is something which I think it has taken everybody by surprise, including the people of Pakistan. The second thing which they have done is, once you have started saying that Jammu and Kashmir is now a part of Pakistan, right? As per their map, that is what they're trying to state. Now, if that be so, then their entire case in the United Nations has gone for a toss. You see, which was one of the reasons they weren't doing it earlier. So I think they need to clarify their stance. What exactly is their stance? What are they looking for, right? This is not just cartographic aggression. I think it is cartographic stupidity. And I have no doubts that this has been brought on by China, putting pressure onto Pakistan. And it also gives a face-saving sort of exercise to Imran Khan to say, okay, India has done this, now we are responding boldly also. It's not going to cut any eyes. They are going to cut their nose very badly. So let us see how events pan out. But I think what they have done is very, very foolish. It has been done at the behest of China, and it is not going to pay them any dividends.
All right. So let's look at this issue of maps then in entirety. Professor, in the subcontinent, this is not the first time that it has happened in the recent past. We've seen it happening with Nepal as well. We've seen it now happen with Pakistan. So is there a pattern emerging really as far as maps are concerned?
Yes, I think there is a pattern emerging, Frank, and I think the pattern is very clearly how China is using this cartographic aggression or cartographic stupidity, whatever one might want to call it, to leverage some of the ties that it has developed over the years with certain constituencies in the subcontinent. And I think when you look at what, for example, Nepal did, the Nepalese government did, or when you look at what Imran Khan did, I mean, the reality on the ground is clearly very, very different. The ability to operationalize these maps is clearly very limited. But certainly there is the role of China has become very, very palpable in most of these developments, because what is also happening in a certain, the larger context in which this is happening is also very evident to all the stakeholders. Our relationship with China, the border problems with China, and in the Pakistani case, of course, there is also the question of how China wants to put pressure on India through various means. And here is one more attempt to do it, very, very blatant, very, very stupid, very, very absurd, but clearly an attempt to to make a case to the world that, look, this can also be done by China's proxies, if India does it, for example, in Jammu and Kashmir. And let us go back to last year, August 5th and 6th. Since then, China has been very, very nervous about the developments that have been happening in India and the way India had taken this issue almost to the, it had tried to recast this whole issue by leveraging its own constitution and its own constitutional framework and doing away with Article 370. China has been complaining since then. And we have also seen developments, also in very recent developments, how China, in cahoots with Pakistan, has taken this issue all the way to the Security Council, the territorial issue. So clearly, I think that the imprint of China looms large today on the subcontinent, and they are trying to use their proxies. Unfortunately, I think what is going to happen, or what is likely to happen, is that these proxies are going to, get all the brunt of this, and they are going to miserably fail in their endeavors, and they are going to be challenged by various constituencies, including India. With Pakistan in particular, we know that they have not been able to get any traction since last year. They've been trying with the international community, and the international community simply has no time for Pakistan. And all the claims have fallen on deaf ears. And I think this is one of those last roll of the dice that they seem to be making in keeping the issue alive at the behest of China, of course, at a time when China also is facing an immense backlash across the world. So what we are witnessing is this alliance of two almost roguish actors on the global stage, trying to make a case to the international community and to turn the tables on India, which I think is not going to go very far.
All right, points taken. Taking the discussion forward now, let me take a point that the professor just made, Ambassador, with you. How seriously is the world going to take this issue really, and is going to take Pakistan? I mean, because, in the recent past too, we've seen that Pakistan has shot itself in the foot quite a few times. So this seems like just another, another incident where it has done the same. So how seriously is the world going to take Pakistan now?
You read my mind. It is said that Pakistan does not just shoot itself in the feet, but they've gotten pretty good at it because they've learned to load the revolver faster. So that is Pakistan. I mean, this country's credibility is zilch. Here are leaders who used to go to the US and other places and profess being a partner while hiding master terrorists in their own country. So this is the kind of character that Pakistan has. But look at how incredulous the whole exercise is. And how confused they are. On the one hand, they come up with a map claiming entire Jammu and Kashmir. And then the worthy foreign minister Qureshi says, which he did a couple of days ago, that there should be a plebiscite because we believe that the entire Kashmir region is disputed and needs a solution. So, Honorable Foreign Minister, sir, if it is the entire region is disputed and you need a plebiscite, then how can you claim the whole region? I mean, these are small details that they are absolutely oblivious to. Now, they are also claiming Junagadh. And it's a fact that till the late 40s, early 50s, these kind of maps used to be prevalent. And they also have the titular head of Junagadh, the erstwhile ruler's son, who is in Karachi and who keeps on issuing statements asking for Pakistan to claim Junagadh. These have been reported in the media, but Junagadh is not even contiguous to Pakistan. The entire premises of the partition was that the principle of contiguity had to be followed. This had been dropped for decades, and suddenly it comes up. Sir Creek. Now, Sir Creek is almost solved, and yet you bring up this issue. So what you are basically doing is to say, as General Katoch was mentioning, and I will just build on that a little, is that all that has happened between 50s and till today is being negated. They're reneging on that. So there is no Shimla agreement. There is no Lahore declaration. There is no bilateralism. All right. In which case, we are not committed to any agreements if they are not committed. So why should we be committed to the Indus Water Treaty? Why should we be committed to the other things? Pakistan is, as you said, shooting themselves in the feet. They are pretty good at it. Given their track record, nobody will take them seriously. Nobody has the time for that. But this is a country which will continue to do what it does best, to create confusion, problems for itself and for the region around and beyond. That is the nature of our neighbor.
I'll come to the region in just a bit, but before that, General, as far as Pakistan is concerned, or as far as we are concerned, we shouldn't just dismiss this as absurd and frivolous and keep quiet, isn't it? Because you never know what the Pakistanis could be up to, and this is not the end for them. They're going to keep trying new tactics and new games like this going forward as well. So we have to be on our toes and we have to be prepared for anything that comes from across the border.
You see, Frank, what Pakistan is doing is certainly something which is what we can term cartographic aggression. But I think the larger danger doesn't come from Pakistan on India's western front. I think the larger danger comes from China and in eastern Ladakh. Because what Pakistan's cartographic aggression has done is to give China an opportunity to enter. And now if they do something in eastern Ladakh, they can make a claim, however absurd it may be, but it gives them a fig leaf to say that, listen, when we are coming into eastern Ladakh, we are actually coming in to help Pakistan because they are claiming it as their territory. And while this is not going to be acceptable in the world, but at least from having no reason at all, now they have got a fig leaf of which they can at least try to justify such aggression to their own people. Now, the second point is, when you look at this particular map, what have they done? What has Pakistan done? When you're looking at the Siachen Glacier, if you recall, the line of control had actually been delineated up to NJ 9842. And from there, the wording was thence north to the glaciers, which meant across the Saltoro Ridge and getting on to Shashgam Valley. Now, the Saltoro Ridge is obviously it is occupied by India, and on the east, the entire Siachen Glacier is with India. But what Pakistan has now done in their map, the line of control, they have actually marked eastwards up to the Karakoram Pass, which in a sense is giving them contiguity on the map with China. So I think their intentions don't appear to be good. We need to be very careful. But our awareness much more with respect to what China is doing, or because I am certain, as has already been mentioned by both my colleagues earlier, that this is being done at the behest of China. And if China is doing it at a behest, they have got some long-term motive behind it, as you had yourself mentioned earlier, what they're doing in Nepal. So we need to be very wary of what is happening in eastern Ladakh and, nip, so to say, the evil in the bud.
All right, Professor, let me bring you in now. So what are our options really as far as dealing with Pakistan is concerned? Do we deal with them directly? Of course, you've always said, even bilaterally and at international fora, that this particular issue that we have in Pakistan is a bilateral issue and that's how we're going to deal with it. But looking at the larger scheme of things in the region, especially with what Pakistan is doing in Afghanistan and elsewhere in the region, trying to get a stranglehold and trying to keep India out, what should our options be?
Well, Frank, one of the things that has happened, I think, very correctly in the last few years is that we have seen a consensus about India's Pakistan policy being a subset of India's China policy. And I think that is something that we are all agree upon. We look at Pakistan mostly as a basket case, as a problem, as a nuisance, basically, that will keep on erupting from time to time. But largely where Pakistan is today deriving its sustenance, Pakistan is today deriving its energy, it's largely from Chinese support. So clearly the focus has to be on how to manage China. And I think as General pointed out, what is happening in eastern Ladakh, therefore, is very, very important, very, very crucial, because that is where we are standing up to the Chinese and telling them, look, we have to preserve a status quo ante. And unless you do that, we cannot move forward. And I think the way India has, in the last few years, has been very resolute with China on a number of issues, whether it's BRI. After all, a lot of what is happening today between China and Pakistan has to do with BRI and Chinese frustration at India's continuing opposition to BRI. So clearly there is that element also which is playing in the Chinese mind, making it easier for China to make a political case for BRI, for that disputed territory, if China issues such a map. So where we are looking at today is basically standing up to the Chinese, and for Pakistan, we have been quite successful in marginalizing them in the global discourse. So if you look at what where Pakistan stands today in the larger Committee of Nations, it's quite clear that Pakistan has very few friends left. Pakistan has been marginalized. Most of the time, Pakistan is looked at through the prism of being a nuisance actor, as an actor that has clearly, failed to live up to its expectations of being, if at all, responsible. And now that same criteria is being used for China, where China is being looked at as more of a roguish actor, which does not believe in any of these treaties, norms, institutional frameworks that have been created. So clearly, I think the focus has to be how to stand up to China, how to manage China, and how to make it clear to China that even with the help of its proxies, it will not succeed vis-a-vis India, because the equities that India has are far too important, that they need to be preserved, and India will take every appropriate action on these matters, because clearly these are not simply matters of which one can ignore in the short term, because they have some long-term strategic consequences. So every engagement that China makes, which is basically China's modus operandi, that you create new realities on the ground through salami slicing, that has to be objected to consistently, repeatedly, and made a case to the world that, look, what China is doing to India is not simply being done to India, but it is being done to a larger international order that is facing this immense problems from China's rise, which clearly is creating problems not only for India, but also for other stakeholders in the region and beyond.
All right, points taken. Ambassador, let me come to you now. So from a diplomatic point of view, what is it that we need to do? Because we've been extremely successful, like the other panelists have suggested as well, in isolating Pakistan on several of these issues. Do we continue to do that? Do we up the ante? What is it that we need to do from a diplomatic point of view going forward?
Yes, we'll have to be very careful and measured because we don't want to overstate it. This is what Pakistan and China wants. That we go hammers and tongs, and that we don't want to do. At the same time, we cannot allow their propaganda to continue without being rebutted. Just as Pakistan used to talk or does talk about Kashmir at every forum, and we have to respond to that in a measured tone. Similarly, I think this is a cross that we'll have to bear given the kind of neighborhood that we have, that we have to periodically make it very clear that these maps are not worth the paper they are written on. Also to point out that if this is how territorial issues are to be resolved, then it is a free for all. I mean, tomorrow we can claim half of the world, and does that become ours? I mean, there has to be some order, there has to be some system in taking care, discussing, and resolving territorial issues, if any. So I think it is we are quite capable of doing that. But the only difference is that now China seems to have joined hands with Pakistan to highlight that case. But as my colleagues were mentioning, the true face of Pakistan is also known. The global pushback has begun. So we have to stay the course as usual. We cannot change neighbors, so we have to deal with them and keep exposing them, keep on bringing out the facts as they are.
All right, General, let me go back to a point that you were making earlier. You're talking about how Pakistan has been unsuccessful really in trying to carry out its agenda in Jammu and Kashmir and has thus resorted to absurd, tactics now. So is that what we are going to see more of in the months and years to come, especially in Jammu and Kashmir, where they're going to try out low-cost options, try and spread propaganda, and and try and destabilize the country?
You see, Frank, what they have been trying to do is to push in terrorists and to create that environment by which they can show the world that the entire valley is up in flames. Now, Pakistan has miserably failed in that particular attempt because what has happened in the last 1 year, we have seen a downslide as far as violence levels are concerned. Stone pelting has reduced by about 60 to 70%. There's a dramatic come down. And one of the reasons for stone pelting coming down was it was a sponsored activity. Right? So what you're really looking at is you are looking at normalcy coming in, but you're looking at a different type of violence coming in now. If you have noticed what the people are doing, instead of targeting security forces by which they're getting very serious losses there, they have started targeting political representatives. Now, when you look at the grassroots levels, there are so many political representatives who owe allegiance to a particular political party, and they become very soft targets. So to create that level of uncertainty, they have started that targeting. I think we have to be on the watch as far as these activities are concerned. They may be low-scale activities, but they keep the embers of the fire burning. That is one aspect. Number two, I think as far as the government of India is concerned and the government of the UT is concerned, I think they will have to make a very rapid push towards a few things. One of them is really the economic agenda and the political agenda. Those activities are happening, and for some reason, India is very impatient. You see, we've had a conflict for 30 years, and we want it to be resolved in 10 minutes. It is not Maggie noodles. It is going to take time. So I think this aspect that it is going to take time must be explained by the government to the people of India and to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Don't look at it as a 6 months or a 1 year phenomena. Within 5 years, we will give you total peace. Now, once you give them a time frame and we live up to that time frame, I think it becomes acceptable to the people. In my view, the government of India is going absolutely correct in its foreign policy response, diplomatic and economic response to the Pakistanis. And I think the ground action on Jammu and Kashmir is also coming out very well. But we must remember it takes time. And this is something which people are not really, or we have not emphasized enough, that things cannot happen overnight. And I think we need to tell the people, come out up front, everything will be done, this is the timeline, and we will do it. And China, of course, needs to be handled with great firmness. And as Professor Harshpant said, the way we are handling them now, we cannot afford to let the pressure go.
Okay, points taken. What's the best way forward, Harshpant?
Yes, I think I would agree with General Katoch in terms of the Jammu and Kashmir issue, and I think there we have seen tremendous progress, tremendous empowerment over the last year, and I think that process needs to continue to a logical conclusion. It's very important for the future of India. It's very important for the future of Kashmir, and it is very important, I think, for the larger normative argument that India has been making about the reasons for the problems there. So I think it's very important that we stay the course. And I think the other issue remains that increasingly we will have to see China becoming a very, very important actor even on these issues. See, when we think of Kashmir, traditionally it's India-Pakistan binary we are used to. I think we'll have to break that binary now and increasingly look at China to be a very, very important influence. Pakistan may be using absurd means at the moment, but they're using it at someone's behest. And I think we have to go there at the root and try to figure a response out to that problem. Because as I think we were discussing earlier, if our Pakistan policy is a subset of a China policy, then whatever happens in that important geography of Kashmir, that will also have to have its roots in China. And China increasingly is becoming more vocal about it, more blatant about it, more explicit about it. Just look at their UNSC presence and UNSC, the kind of attempts that they have made at the UNSC. So clearly we have to be on guard as far as China is concerned. And once we have taken care of our border issues with China, we have to take into account Chinese presence in the larger geography where China continues to be where China will continue to be a very, very important player, irrespective of what happens to Pakistan. Pakistan can be marginalized, but China will have to be dealt with very, very firmly.
All right, and Ambassador, close the show for us with your quick concluding remarks.
Sure. If China and Pakistan continue to behave the way they are, then two can play the same game. There is a global pushback. China and Pakistan also have much more vulnerabilities. There is Balochistan, which is in crisis. There is Taiwan. There are other areas. And I think they can also be given a taste of their own medicine. We can see things already happening. US, for example, for the first time since 1979, has decided to send a cabinet minister to Taiwan. So the writing is on the wall. And it is about time that they smell the coffee and hopefully realize that enough is enough. But if they don't, then two can play the same game.
Okay, all right. On that note, then I'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of the discussion is that Pakistan has not been able to digest the fact that India has taken a tough stance and has revoked special status to Jammu and Kashmir in August 2019. And are now doing absurd things and trying everything that they possibly can to hurt India. We have been successful while dealing with Pakistan, but we can't ignore Pakistan, and we have to always be alert and be on our toes is what our panelists are suggesting. With that, it's a wrap. See you again next time.